companies tend to focus on front-end sales a lot. And that's just not the way companies ultimately grow. If you bring in a new customer and you bang the gong and do the cheer and everybody's so happy that they won a new customer, but then you don't keep them, then you literally are in a position where if they don't renew at the end of year one, and this is definitely true in a lot of SaaS companies, if they don't renew at the end of year one, you've done all that work to serve them at a loss. And so retention is where you actually make your money.
Hi there, folks, and thank you for tuning in to Lifetime Value. My name is Dillon Young, and I'm the host of this podcast, and I cannot thank you enough for giving our brand new podcast your time and attention. My goal with this podcast is to contribute something different and refreshing to the community in the form of a weekly podcast that keeps folks up to date on the goings-on in our little corner of the professional world. Now, that being said, this episode was recorded in late 2022, and so it is not in our typical format. Still, I know you're going to enjoy this conversation. Peace. All right, welcome to Lifetime Value. Ali Cudby, it's good to have you here.
It's great to be here. Thanks.
And Ali, you are the co-founder and CEO at CXology and Alignment Growth Strategies. Do I have that right?
You do, yeah.
And so can you tell us a little bit more about who you are and what it is that you do at those two companies?
Sure. So professionally, we focus on helping companies improve retention through a better customer experience, and Alignment and CXology address that from two different sides of the house. Alignment is the white glove consulting side of things where we go real deep into the customer experience with companies and help them create a high level focus on cross-functional ways that customer experience drives retention and growth. And CXology is an online training platform where we're really more focused on B2B SaaS and those companies that really focus on returning recurring revenue and using a training platform online to support them.
And one of those kind of begets the other. Is that right? You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So ultimately with CXology, what we drive to is plays. And when you think about the customer experience and when you think about the life cycle through a customer's experience, especially in a recurring revenue business where you know that you have sort of a predictable cycle, there's either an annual renewal or sometimes a multi-year renewal. So you know that you're going to have these key beats throughout that cycle. What we focus on is how do you create clear and consistent plays so that your team members know what to do when those moments arise. And nowadays, when people are hybrid and remote, it's that much harder to get everybody on your team aligned around how do you deliver these moments consistently inside of a company. And so that's sort of CXology. And ultimately where we end up with on the alignment side is, hey, you need plays. And so they kind of do dovetail together. It's just more a matter of alignment doing a deeper dive into the work that leads up to the plays and being more customized.
And what I think is interesting about your story is you came about this in a bit of a roundabout way. Is that right? Do you want to talk about where you've been and how it is that you got to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. You can definitely say it's a nonlinear career path.
A winding road.
So a winding road, but a delightful one. So, the first chapter is that I worked in Hollywood after college, which was a lot of fun. And I worked on some really bad, crazy movies where we blew a lot of things up and, spent a few years figuring out that I did not want to work in Hollywood and ended up going back to business school. And after B school, I ended up at the New York Times Company and was in their corporate strategy group, which acted effectively as an internal consulting group for the company, not just the newspapers. And I got put on a customer service project, which was really considered to be like the loser project. I mean, that was not sexy at all. And what I found in doing this project was that it actually was incredibly sexy. And what I learned was that the company, New York Times, pretty awesome brand, globally recognized, all that, they really hadn't focused on the customer's experience. And long story short, understanding how the New York Times company engaged with its employees and how that in turn drove the customer experience was that light bulb moment for me. That's really what turned on my juices in terms of being interested in this sort of customer loyalty and retention side of the world. And so from there, working on the newspaper with that project, I went over to the New York Times Company's magazine group and did a similar kind of project there where the focus was on advertisers as customers. Then stayed in media, was the director of marketing at Animal Planet, which was a crazy place to work. I mean, you don't often get to be in business meetings with snakes wrapped around your arms, and feeding tigers is not generally the thing that you do.
Wait, did you get to do that? You got to feed a tiger?
Yeah, I did.
In the name of your job?
Yes, it was on a photo shoot for a Jeff Corwin photo shoot, and they brought in all these different kinds of animals. I got to feed a tiger. I got pooped on by a Komodo dragon. Very exciting. Okay.
So when we said winding road, I don't think I was ready for this, but okay, keep going.
So at Animal Planet, the viewers were our customers, and it was the same thing. How do you promote retention and growth? And then after being pooped on by a Komodo dragon, I decided to get out of corporate America and took a very strange left turn. If you don't think that was strange, it gets more interesting from here. I ultimately created a company, as my entrepreneurial side came through, and created a company that was focused on the art and science of how a bra fits a woman's body, and ultimately created a methodology around that and the world's leading online bra fit training and certification program for professionals who use that service in their work, and got to work with people around the world, every continent except Antarctica. I don't think there's a lot of need in Antarctica for that service. So, and then, what ended up happening was that I would talk to my clients and I would say, how's it going? And they'd say, oh, Allie, my customers are crying tears of joy in the fitting room. They're so happy. And I would say, that's great. Now, what are you going to do to make sure that those customers come back and buy from you the next time, or that they come back faster? And the reality is they never had a good answer. Basically they would say, well, we're just going to keep giving them good fittings like you taught us. And I knew from my background in corporate America that that wasn't enough. And so that, in a long, circuitous way, brought me back to the world of customer loyalty and retention. And so I started working first with my lingerie clients on that, and then ultimately evolved the kinds of companies that I was working with. And here we are today.
So let's rewind a second. You referred to customer experience as sexy. Just want to make sure everybody heard that.
Yeah, it is.
Which, hey, I might agree, but an interesting word choice. So actually, tell me what that aha moment was for you, because I think in that same thought process, you talked about how, and this I also found it not nearly as intriguing as CX as sexy, but intriguing in that you said New York Times treated their employees as the customers. Did I hear that right?
No. What I was saying was that the way that the way that the New York Times Company treated its employees had a direct impact on the customer's experience. And that to me is a really critical aha. because the customer's experience is directly tied to how they get treated by your team. And so when you're talking about the customer experience, really what you're talking about is how are you designing employee processes so that they can deliver effectively and consistently.
And that was your aha moment.
Spoiler alert. Yeah, that's not what the New York Times company was doing. So
that's interesting.
I think the statute of limitations is long past, so I'll share a story.
Sure.
So back in the day, if I get a call from the lawyers later, I'll let you know. So back in the day, the call center, if you think about your newspaper subscription, generally, and we were talking about paper subscriptions at that point, generally the only people that you interact with are your delivery person or the call center person. And so the call center was in a windowless warehouse in New Jersey, not the flagship building off of Times Square. And they were paying less than the Burger King up the street. And so therefore, the New York Times company, again, globally recognized, respected brand, was getting people in their call centers who literally couldn't get the job flipping burgers. And that's the kind of small step, big difference insight that we were pulling out. Some of the stuff when you're talking about how do you improve the customer experience, it's not complicated, but it does take thought. You have to actually think about it. And that was one thing that we were able to change. And when you hear that story, you think, God, how could that have even happened? Like, of course they should have been the best paying job on that street or in that neighborhood.
Yeah. Now,
but
you would think that.
Yeah.
But when customer service, right, especially call center roles were, they were a necessity and not necessarily kind of this ambassador to your customer base. It's a cost center. You want to minimize it as much as possible.
Well, that's one way of thinking about it, right? And it is a way that a lot of companies think about it, but I would argue it's a growth engine. And if you're losing customers because of their experience with the call center or your CS team or whatever, if you're thinking about them as a cost center, then you're going to treat them as a cost center and you're not going to get great outcomes. So that's what the shift is. They're not a cost center. They're actually a retention center.
Yeah, I would agree. I certainly my statement was in speaking as the New York Times, and I think most companies thought of back then.
Yes.
But you mentioned retention, and this is kind of where you have staked your claim, right? Is this the retention as the end all be all for customer success, and we know that customer success, kind of the buzzwords are retention is probably first and foremost, but then there's also the idea of upsell, cross-sell, expansion, so on and so forth, championing your product or services to others. Talk to me about why you focus on retention.
Because that really is the linchpin of how companies grow. Companies tend to focus on front-end sales a lot. And that's just not the way companies ultimately grow. As we know, you and I, if you bring in a new customer and you bang the gong and do the cheer and everybody's so happy that they won the new customer, but then you don't keep them, then you literally are in a position sometimes where if they don't renew at the end of year one, and this is definitely true in a lot of SaaS companies, if they don't renew at the end of year one, you've done all that work to serve them at a loss. And so retention is where you actually make your money. It's the long tail. And, it is baffling to me that there's still such an emphasis on the front end sale, which is critical. You have to have it. But but not on retention, which is actually where the money comes from.
And there's certainly a corollary between that initial sale or customer acquisition and the obviously there is a direct through line to revenue there in the same way there is to upsell and cross sell, right? So let's go back to that word
Sure.
sexy. Those are kind of the sexy things, particularly in smaller organizations that are growth minded. We think, everybody thinks revenue is the answer, right? And I guess, yes, that's technically true, but there's a cheaper form of revenue sitting right in front of you, and that's the idea behind retention, right? So,
Yeah, I have another sexy word, and that's referral. Talk about the easiest, best way to get another good customer. And so these indirect revenue streams that customers bring to you are really important and really lucrative. And it makes sense to have processes in place to deliver that good customer experience so that you tease those things out in a way that isn't about, squeezing the last dime out of a customer, but really about authentically building relationships so that they get the value of your products and services and are so thrilled that they tell their friends and colleagues.
Sure. Yeah, and that was going back a minute. That's what I was referring to with the championing of your products and services. Is that sexy referral word?
Yeah.
I want to take a step back, and you may have already answered this, but I want to maybe attack it head on and ask you, when you hear the word or the phrase customer success, what does customer success mean to you? Say you're at a family party, your crazy aunts, and they ask you, what is this newfangled customer success? How do you answer that?
So I would say that customer success is a department inside of a company that is focused on being the curator of the customer's journey with the products and services that they've bought. And so I differentiate customer success and customer experience. So I think of customer success as being that department. And, I think, customer success is still being defined and redefined.
Sure.
I don't know that we have a clear, we know what sales does. We're still not sure what customer success does.
Well, it depends on what sales. Now, what they do depends on whether you have customer success, how mature you're. As an advocate of customer success, I think customer success redefines a lot of that stuff, but I digress. So you believe customer success is the department and customer experience then is
the holistic approach. That's the cross-functional approach of looking at what is going on with a customer from the beginning of their journey with your company through the end, and after the end. So that's what I think. It's cross-functional, it's holistic, and it is that sort of strategic role, and customer success is a vital and necessary piece of customer experience.
Would you consider the customer success department to be the primary stewards of the customer experience?
Yes. Well, I mean, yes, and right, because now there are confusing ways that companies are slicing and dicing these things. Like, oh, well, we have a customer success department, but we also have an onboarding department. And so, those things kind of go hand in glove. But if you're defining one as customer success and one as a different thing, then it gets confusing. So that's part of the reason that I think that the language is mushy and not in a helpful way. As opposed to when mushy language is super helpful. But, but I think that the customer success department doesn't, is not put in the best advantage by some of the vocabulary that kind of goes around with the functions that the department does.
It sounds like you have more to say about that. Is there a particular example that you have in regards to where maybe we're doing customer success, where companies, not us specifically, you and me, are doing customer success a disservice and making their roles more ambiguous than they should be?
It's really more, I don't think it's a company thing. I think it's this sort of global way that we think about it. So the example that I just gave of having a company that has an onboarding department and a customer success department, and what is the role of customer success there? It's only a portion of the customer's experience. And so if you talk about who's the primary steward of the customer experience, if onboarding is being managed by a separate department that isn't called customer success, it just gets confusing.
And the way I have always advocated for onboarding is exactly that. It should live within customer success. It is but one function of customer success. So I would agree with that. All right, so let's move on to our next segment, and this is a segment that we refer to as cruise control. We're going to run through a number of topics in the customer success space, and often we'll touch on current events overall. The process for cruise control is very simple, Allie. I don't want to overcomplicate this for you. I'm going to run through a number of statements or headlines, and if you would like to hear more or discuss, share your opinion, you're going to say hit the brakes. But if you want to skip a topic, you just say keep cruising, keep it moving. You can use whatever language you'd like to. Okay, but the important one is hit the brakes. Okay?
Okay.
All right, number one. In SaaS, a good product isn't enough anymore.
Hit the brakes.
Okay. See, you scared me for a second there. I wondered if my directions were not clear enough. Okay, hit the brakes. In your article published for Gain, Grow, Retain on November 7th, you note that it's not enough to have a stellar product anymore. Rather, you must have a customer retention strategy to complement your product offerings. I'm sensing a theme here, but why don't you tell everybody a little bit more about what that article is about and that viewpoint?
Sure. I mean, it really encapsulates a lot of the things that we've been talking about. And, especially in a world where not only are you trying to figure out as a company, you're trying to figure out how do you want to address the customer's experience, but also how do you want to make sure that you're doing it in a consistent way. If your product is great and the experience is bad, or confusing, then you're not going to succeed in retaining your customers to the best possible advantage. And, so many times we see companies that get into this sort of group think biosphere bubble of how awesome their product is and how easy it is to use, and in fact, it's not. And you need to have a guided experience, a guided process through getting up and running. And if you don't have that, then customers are going to be frustrated and they're going to split. Or you see companies that are moving so fast. This is certainly true in SaaS. They're moving so fast that they come out with a product update. And, like some of our clients, we've walked in the door and it's like, oh, there was a product update and nobody bothered to tell the CS team. And so now
I've been there.
It's fun, right? And so now, like, the customers are literally not getting the same product, and maybe features that they like have been dropped, or data they can't access the same way anymore. And the CS team is completely caught unawares. And that is not going to make for a good customer experience. And, if you do something like that once as a company, then customers are probably going to let it slide. But what we find a lot of times is that customers churn not because of the one big mistake. They churn because it feels like death by a thousand paper cuts. And so you get the one and then the next and the next. And then finally, people are just like, I've had it. And so the product alone, oftentimes just doesn't stand on its own 2 feet. It really does need a good experience to go along with it, a solid kickoff, a great onboarding, a clear path to first value and beyond. But also, the product team doesn't play nice in the sandbox with their peer departments, which ultimately hoses everybody. It's not good for the customer success team. It's not good for the sales team. It's not good for the marketing team. And it's definitely not good for the customers.
I might argue, I might even word it slightly differently. It's saying the exact same thing. I think your customer experience is a part of the product offering. It's the ongoing relationship with the product. Now, it is not the ones and zeros. That if we're talking SaaS, it's not the ones and zeros that they're actually purchasing. But in a lot of ways, it's it's what keeps them sticking around, right? And that seems terribly obvious on a podcast about customer success.
Yeah, I love that way of thinking about it. And I wish companies looked at it that way more often. And I would even argue, I'll pile on to what you just said. In companies where the training and the wiki and the resources and the troubleshooting, whatever, all of those are compiled by maybe the CS team, but the not product team, then that integration of product and not product is even more blurry. That wasn't a good sentence, but you know what I mean? Like that the line is blurrier because I don't think customers sit there and say, oh, well, I'm in the FAQs and that's not part of the product. It's all part of their product experience, which means it's all part of their customer experience. Yeah. And
what it brings to mind is the word I use a lot of scientific words like squishy, and in this case, clunky. It's just a clunky experience. It is an experience with a lot of friction. And that's the thought I was thinking of earlier is, you said death by 1,000 paper cuts. I think I talk a lot about customer success as a relationship. I always go to a romantic relationship. And this idea of, I think of someone sitting down with their friends, they're talking about this person they're dating, and they say, it's just hard. Like, it's hard to be with this person. And that is friction, right? And I agree 100%. If I look at it, that's, to me, why customers leave. It's just hard.
Yeah. And a little bit of hard, you might say like, relationships aren't always easy. And I'm willing to stick it out, right? I'm willing to see.
But that's those colossal mistakes, right? They happen every once in a while. Yeah, he's a real idiot, but I love him. But if he screws up every day, he burns the dinner every night, or he never comes home on time, he can't, get out of his own way. That is the difference, in my opinion.
Right. And eventually you say, right, exactly. This isn't worth it anymore. I'm out.
All right, number 2. So cruise control is supposed to be fast. No, it's fine. It's fine. You can do whatever you like, Allie. Number 2, all existing sales should be the responsibility of the CSM.
Okay, I'll play. What is it? Hit the brakes. All existing sales be the responsibility.
Let me give you a little bit more. So Marcus Wrench, thought leader in the customer success space, he recently wrote in a newsletter, and he asked the question, why would customers rather buy from an AM/AE account manager or account executive they've spent maybe 15 minutes with instead of from their trusted advisor, aka the customer success manager?
So to me, this is sort of exactly where this role of CS thing gets interesting, because sales doesn't want to let go of the revenue. So, we can talk about philosophically what should happen, or we can talk about realistically what's going on. And so I totally buy that customer success should manage the relationship, and that includes cross sells, upsells, and all of those things. And so that means revenue. And it makes sense, right? If you're doing it right, then you are selling by serving, and you are, genuinely trying to help your customer be successful with your products and services. And that means helping them get more out of what they've bought. And oftentimes that means, there should be more, or, hey, we have this other thing. And so that makes total sense. It's just not politically feasible in a lot of companies. There's my hot take. So should they? Yes. Do they? No. Will they? Probably not.
A lot to unpack there, especially hot take is a trigger word for me, or a trigger phrase for me. But I'm gonna breeze right past it to keep keep on cruising. So number 3.
No, we'll talk about that later.
14 can't lose strategies for customer retention in 2023. Do you want to hear about them?
Nah. All right. Cruise on by.
Cruise on by. Number 4, in downtimes, you can't simply give your CSMs more work.
Sure, I'll play. Hit the brakes.
We'll spare the names of the innocent, only because there's too many of them. This is a thing I've been seeing on LinkedIn a lot. Obviously, we roll a lot in these customer success circles, customer experience circles, and I'm seeing a lot of these posts recently that are, it's almost begging from customer success thought leaders of, please don't give your CSMs more work. And the basic idea is they already influence this mightily critical aspect of your business, retention and obviously expanding upon revenue. And you cannot afford for them to take their eye off the ball, particularly in the down times where your attitude or your mentality, your default is to try and do more with less. Their argument is, please don't do that to CS, because they are already doing something that is so critically important to the business. Do you agree with that?
Right. Yeah, I think it rolls back to where we were earlier in this conversation. If you're looking at CS as a cost center, then you want to wring the most cost, most value out of that cost as you can. And so if that's your perception, then sure, that makes sense. It's just that it's wrong.
It shouldn't be your perception. Got it.
It should not be your perception. And so did I not say that emphatically enough today?
Yeah, if you could enter a swear word in there, that's my preferred underlining method. No, go ahead.
And so I mean, it's the reason that they keep dumping more shit.
Yes.
There you go. On CSMs is because they think that they're cost centers. They don't see them as growth engines, and that is backward. That is wrong, and that is short-sighted. It is short-sighted more than anything else. We won't name names. We won't call them backwards and wrong. I just did, but it's short-sighted.
Did you want me to edit that out?
So that's why.
Those shots across the bow.
Yeah, screw it.
I didn't think so. I wasn't going to do it anyways. It was for dramatic effect. I agree 100%. You know what? Actually, I'm going to move on because again, let's keep it tight. Number 5, a combination of heart and smart are the keys to increasing retention.
Oh, I'm going to stop on that one. You're speaking.
Hit the brakes.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead. So, actually, let me start off by saying this. This is a concept you talk about extensively in your book, Keep Your Customer, as well as your online training program, CXology. Can you share more about this theory and how you put it into practice?
Yeah. So humans, whether or not they are customers, there's a fundamental need to feel seen, heard, and valued. And it exists across every relationship that they have. Every person needs to feel seen, heard, and valued. And when you can make people feel seen, heard, and valued, you promote a better relationship. So it's not that they have to have it from every relationship that they have, because obviously there are many where they don't. But if what you want to do is build a good relationship, what you need to do is make people feel seen, heard, and valued. That is the heart of, it's the heart of humans, and therefore the heart of customers. And so, yes, we can have transactional businesses, but when we're talking about companies that have like a CS function, it's inherently not just transactional. And that's what we're talking about here, right? And so when you can make people feel valued, you improve the likelihood that they are going to stick around longer. And this isn't just some sort of highfalutin concept. McKinsey's done research that shows that 70% of a buying decision is built on how a person feels they were treated in the transaction. So that feeling component is a real business need, not just, woo-woo, earthy, crunchy, fancy dancy ways of thinking about things. So how do you do that? How do you make people feel seen, heard, and valued? How do you get to the heart of that customer? Through clear and consistent processes that are backed by real tracking and metrics and analytics that you learn from and apply and get better at. How do you do it? Through smart approaches. So ergo, you have to have the heart and the smart in order to successfully deliver a great customer experience.
I'm interested to know whether McKinsey, if in their research, and maybe you know the answer to this, if there was any difference in the 70% mark and that being the amount of influence a relationship or good feelings has on a buying decision, whether that changes up or down the hierarchy or within the decision-making unit, or if there's a dollar amount that might change that. Do you happen to know?
So as you were just saying that, I was thinking back to so it was the research that went into the book. And, my recollection now that I'm thinking about it is that it really was not based on a dollar amount. It was something that was across the board. Yeah.
All right, so I want to move on to our next segment. This may be my favorite segment that we do. It is built entirely off of a pun. As a recently christened father, I am working on my pun game. And so this is a segment that we refer to as BS in CS. Ultimately, customer success, as we all know, Allie, you even said it's still evolving. I don't know if that'll ever end. But it's also a very exciting field to be a part of. The problem is that these same attributes can often attract a certain type of character or actor. You've got the ebook author. You've got the perfect process peddler. You've got the template trafficker. That's as far as I could go with my alliteration. I'm sure there are more. I would love to hear from the audience their ideas. Anyway, it's easy to get swept up in these trends, these catchphrases, but sometimes we just need to get back to basics. I have one question for you, Allie, and you can punt, though I do not recommend it, given that this is my favorite segment. If you had to choose one, what is the trend, catchphrase, or otherwise related to customer success and touted within the customer success circles that you would like to see done away with completely?
This is a good one. I got two.
Okay. Okay. Now, do you lead with the better one, or do you save? Is that your kind of like the cherry on top?
I'll let you be the judge. So the first one is the customer is always right is wrong. The customer is not always right. And it is not helpful to companies or customers to keep perpetuating that story. Because sometimes you just have unreasonable customers that ask for too much, and you cannot build a business without boundaries. You have to be able to create guardrails. Otherwise, you're not putting your employees in a fair position to be able to have a conversation with customers that are asking for things where the answer has to be no. And so that is one. The customer is not always right. And let's just stop saying that they are, because all we're getting is a bunch of really annoying, entitled customers.
Preach. Preach, Allie. The customer is not always right. There is inherently, and this is natural, it's fine, but there is inherently a tension and a friction between the customer and the, I hate using this word, vendor relationship. The customer is incentivized to get as much as they can from you for the dollars they pay, or to push you further down the line in terms of your products and services. And that's fine. That's exactly what they are supposed to do. But if you ever lose sight of that and you say, oh yeah, just give it to them for free because the customer's always right, I mean, it is only a matter of time before you're out of business, right? Now, obviously, that's hyperbolic in my statement, but I truly believe that, and I would die on that hill. Damn it!
I'll go up that hill with you. Yeah. So 2. You want 2?
Number 1's gonna be hard to beat, but I'm excited for number 2. Let's see.
NPS is an often overused and misused metric.
Hallelujah! How did you do that? I don't know if it's better. It's different. It's different. It's like pie and ice cream. I love both. I would eat both every day for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. All right, keep going. Tell me more.
So it's not inherently bad. It's just that it is so often not used well. So you can, I've seen so many companies figure out who their detractors are and then wrap themselves in circles or tie themselves in knots or whatever it is that I'm trying to say, trying to serve the detractors only to realize, or they never realize, that those weren't your customers. So you do all of these things to try and manipulate a number without thinking about who you're asking. And in trying to serve those unhappy few, instead of saying, well, maybe there's a reason that they're unhappy that isn't about our product or isn't about
maybe they're
our
just
service,
unhappy people. They're just miserable people.
Either they're just unhappy people or they are just the wrong customer for you. And so you can't just try and fix the detractors. And I think that there's something inherently played about NPS, especially when you have companies that use NPS, that ask about NPS to people who use NPS. It's just we all know how the game is played, right? And so if you are a company who serves a company that also is playing that game, then you're probably not getting good data back anymore. Maybe if you're talking in a B2C world, there's some value there. There are ways to use NPS in a smart way. It's not just a trash metric. It's just used in a trash way a lot of the time.
Yeah. NPS, you said all the right things. What I tell folks is NPS does a very specific thing. It measures loyalty to products and services, right? That's the definition of it. And it does a very specific thing, and it's very good at that. What I find maddening is when people use, and you know what? I'm a positive guy. I want to make sure everybody's clear on this. I think it's a very important score. But what is crazy about NPS is the way it gets bastardized. And that's kind of what you were saying, right? This idea that you should use NPS to measure the performance of a support ticket, of an individual support ticket. What are you asking that user to be loyal to? That
right.
You know what? I think I'm just going to leave that there. I'm not going to say anything more. I want to move on to the conclusion of our show and give you, Allie, an opportunity to give a referral and or a recommendation to the audience.
Shawn Achor, ShawnAchor, has one of my favorite podcasts. He also has a really great book.
Did you show up on my podcast? It's fine.
It's
fine.
No,
it's
not
fine.
a podcast. Sorry,
I'm kidding.
I lied. It's a TED Talk. No, but it's a TED Talk.
No, it's fine.
It is. It really is. One of the best TED Talks, one of my favorite TED Talks, and it is about the things that you can do to be more positive in your life. It's the sort of positive psychology. He works in the realm of positive psychology. He is funny. He is brilliant. There are 5 very simple steps that he gives you in the TED Talk, which is not a podcast. And you can follow them, and it really does shift how you think and makes you a happier, more positive person. And like I said, super, super enjoyable. Shawn
Achor, TED Talk. Do not Google Shawn Achor podcast.
Why would you do that?
I'm going to check that out. And once I do, I'll include it in the show notes as well.
Oh, yeah.
Allie, where can folks connect with you online?
So come to the websites, cxology.co or alignment, MINT, alignmentforgrowth.com. Find me on LinkedIn. Please find me on LinkedIn. I am only on LinkedIn. Don't bother trying to find me on other
TikTok?
social. I won't find you. You'll find me there, but you won't find me there. Like, just
sure.
say no. And that my TikTok algorithm is now carefully curated to just show me delightful dog
Perfect.
videos. So I'm pretty okay with that. So yeah, LinkedIn, websites. I'm easy to find.
And my third question was, where can folks learn more about CXology and alignment for growth? But I can use this as a quiz. CXology.co, C-O, and alignment, spelled M-I-N-T, for growth, all one word, .com. Correct?
Yes. Oh, yeah. And then the book, Keep Your Customers.
Keep Your Customers, which
there's that too.
You can find on what outlets?
Amazon. It's just
I didn't want to say Amazon.
Why?
I didn't know if Amazon takes like 70% of your revenue, or you want them to go through the website, because you have a website for it too.
I do, but you know what? It's just so easy, and it's probably easier for everybody to just buy it through Amazon. Bow down to the behemoth.
It is. Bow down to the behemoth. I think that's a perfect place to end the show. Allie Cudby, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure, and I can't wait to speak to you again.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
You've been listening to Lifetime Value, the podcast for customer success professionals. If you like what you've heard, please rate our show and subscribe wherever you find your podcast. Please note that the views expressed in these conversations are attributed only to those individuals on this podcast and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of their respective employers. For all inquiries, please reach out via email to Dillon@lifetimevaluepodcast.com. Find us on YouTube via our channel, Lifetime Value, and find us on the socials at Lifetime Value Podcast.
Hey there, folks. One last thing. If you are interested in taking part in Allie's classes on CXology, you can get 1 month free by entering my first name as the coupon code at checkout. That is my first name, Dillon, spelled Dillon, at checkout as your coupon code, and you'll get 1 month free of CXology.
Until next time.